smoke break
Yep.
on that good old oxygen. Came back in this
Professional discussions. I kind of enjoy these little things right here. The guys in the trenches. This guy says, the shop had pulled the heads for a valve job. The vehicle now had a misfire code on all cylinders except one. All cylinders except cylinder one had a misfire code. Now some of this is engine repair, a lot of it is. That's where we're at today. So the misfires are only present at idle. When you start the engine, it sounds like the valves may be out of time. You know, like it's, you know, some of the valves are letting air leak by. Cam crank correlation test seems to match the known good waveform. Compression was checked and it was inspected. You see a little scope screen there. And see there. So basically, what he's basically doing is he's looking at his cam. You know, this is going to be the fire end of the ramp of the coil. And this is going to be your crank sensor and it's going to be your cam sensors. There's two of them there. Now they look like they're pretty well lined up. Yeah, you can use a scope if you know what you're looking at and tell if everything's in time. Alright, so it seems to me the only cylinder that shows the valves opening and closing okay is cylinder number one. Cylinder number one is the only cylinder that does not have a misfire code. And the waveforms from the other cylinder don't look proper. Okay, so what do you see wrong with this waveform right here? This is cylinder number one. Does this waveform look good to you?
No,
What's wrong with it?
it's not like in line.
Yeah, what you're saying is this is too low.
Yeah.
That's lower than that and they ought to be pretty well level. And so you learned that from that other, didn't you? Okay, that's pretty good. All right, so in-cylinder tested number three. This one actually looks a little better than that one. See, performed an in-cylinder pressure transducer test. He said he wasn't familiar with it really yet. Okay, so and this was number four. See, that one there looks pretty like you were talking about, doesn't it? Okay. All right, not very familiar with cylinder pressure transducer pattern yet. I just put the same words on this one. And that's cylinder number 6. This one right here is a little deeper there than that one there is. So, you know, a little issue, little discrepancy there. So, comment number one. Now, this is from another guy that was looking at this guy's posts and his pictures, right? He says, it's hard to tell if time is an issue from cylinder pressure fix, but I can tell you there's definitely a valve sealing issue. The pocket of the exhaust is well below the intake, which is right there. And that can be caused by either timing or a valve sealing problem. If you got an overlay for valve for timing, also that vacuum waveform, that'd tell a whole lot more. So basically, this guy wanted more information on the screen. Okay. All right. So comments 2 and 3. Misfires at cold startup or constant misfire may require valve adjustment. Now on the Honda cars, and I'm sure you probably done on some of the European stuff you worked on. You know how you get your feeler gauge and your wrench and you adjust the valves. You know, the valve lash right there, or y'all do that?
No, it's not old cars.
I think Honda, well, not really. A lot of new Hondas do it. Hondas love to have adjustable valves. And I got a Honda engine over there that I can show y'all guys. It's got, you know, you got to break the nut loose and turn your screw, you know, with the valve all the way closed. And you got to set it with, you know, with feeler gauge. But anyway, the Honda van 3.5 misfired idle when cold. It stopped skipping when it got warm. Just the valve lash to Honda Lexus spec, and all the skipping and misfires should go away. So remember that if you got a Honda that's going to screwy misfires, whether it's a V6, even if it's a late model car, and I'm kind of like him. I'm surprised Honda still got them adjusting the valves on them darn things. When my dad used to have that Volkswagen Bug shop, you had to adjust the valves and change the oil real regular on those things. The brakes had to be adjusted. Kind of like your Toyota, the brakes have to be adjusted. They didn't have any automatic brake adjustment on them. You know, you had to adjust the brakes periodically. And the oil change on those Volkswagen Bugs was 1,500 miles. They didn't have an oil filter on it. You know, didn't really, well, for a long time they didn't have drain plugs. You had to, well, they sort of did, but they went away from the drain plug because they wanted you to pull a little screen out and clean it. It was a long story. Anyway, this guy says, I bet if you did a compression test with an amp probe, you'd see inconsistency with an easy hump. So see, as if you're doing it with an amp probe, every time the starter is having to squeeze air, it's going to have a hump in your amps. All that, and if one of them is lower, it's going to be done. He thinks valve adjustment, exhaust pockets too deep compared to intake pocket. Keep it simple. Look at vacuum map sensor fuel trim. What do you see? And the intake valves do tend to loosen over time, and the exhaust valves tighten if your intake valves are loose. Now, why do the intake valves loosen? In other words, the lash gets more, the valve's riding lower in the head, because of usually buildup on the valve. And then the exhaust valve beats up into the seat, so it gets tighter. All right, and this is what the adjustment looks like. You loosen that nut, you turn that until your adjustment is in there. Feel it with your feeler gauge. It's got to drag through there, and you got to have the valve all the way closed when you're doing that. See where the lobe is on the camshaft? All right, intake's 8 to 9 thousandths, exhaust 11 to 13. Set the number 1 piston at TDC with the feeler gauge between the adjusting screw and the end of the valve stem. You should feel a slight amount of drag. And you gotta go from cylinder to cylinder doing all that too. Now, here's another one. 05 Altima 3.5 liter V6 no start. It was driven into the shop with a rattling timing chain. Alright, so customer bought their own used engine from someplace online, shop installed it, but then there was no injector pulse. So you spray intake with carb cleaner, it starts up. What's that tell you? That tells you that everything else is okay except you got a fuel problem. Now if you spray the carb cleaner in there, it still won't start, you know, there may be base engine issues or something like that. No codes, problem with the anti-theft system, no problem with the anti-theft system. The anti-theft system usually disables the injection, and all other data on the scanner looks fine. Double check power is ground since the engine was replaced. Suspicious of engine timing since this is a used engine. Sometimes people, well, whenever they're salvage yard people are taking engines out, they turn the engine backwards. When they turn the engine backwards, it can make it jump out of time, you know. Alright, so we decided to check the cam and crank signal. The cam on the rear of the engine lined up perfectly with the crank signal as posted below. They basically got what it was supposed to look like. And you know, you ought to be able to, you know, count those and look where they lined up and all that. Both cam sensors should line up at several points with the missing tooth slots on the crank signal. On this one, the rear cam always lines up as it should, the front cam never does. Now, I ran into a problem like this one time on a PT Cruiser we worked on, where you'd have just sworn the darn thing was out of time, but it was something else that was wrong with it. So sometimes you can get misled by that, but it's a good thing to check. The PCM was bad, scope pattern cam sounded notwithstanding, and before they pulled it apart because of what he saw with the scope on the front cam timing, decided to go to the local boneyard, got a used PCM, and it fired up. That's what it did with it. No pulse, bad PCM. Why? I don't know. Seen a Hall effect cam sensor trace indicated camshaft was out of time. The scope pattern normalized when the sensor replaced. That's my note. I've seen that on an Altima. So I mean, you just swear looking at that pattern that the cam and the crank were out of time, and that one had a chain on it, and I knew it wasn't because we had double checked it. And so finally I put another sensor in it, and it lined it right up. Started the motor up. So, like I say, watch out for those scope patterns whenever you're looking at them. It's a good thing to check. It's a good piece of data, but there's times whenever you know, your mind is telling you, I know better than that. This engine is not out of time, no matter what this pattern tells me. And sometimes it can be a bad sensor or something else. So I said, we got an injection pulse, but it still wouldn't start. I say it fired up. I didn't tell you, I told a lie. Did some more diagnosis. See, they got an injector pulse, found bad fuel pump relay. So you had two problems. Replaced the relay and it fired up. Would have had loved to rescope the cam timing, but the owner was satisfied, so they were done with it. He says the scanner data showed the cam time was equal on both sides, even though the scope didn't. So maybe it was right. Maybe the engine started, the oil pressure sensors kicked in and got it straightened out. Hard to say. All right, this one here is an 08 Dodge Grand Caravan 3.3. Came in for a mill, retrieved PO301 code. What's that? What's a PO301? Misfire. Number one. Replaced the plugs and wires, test drove, everything seemed fine, started up cold. Cylinder number 1 was missing again just for a few seconds and then it cleared up. I gotta sneeze. Okay, I just sneezed. Does it? Thank you much. Okay, does it almost every time cold and never when warmed up. Swap plugs and injectors, no change. Plenum gaskets are good with no leaks. Okay, now then, think about what you're doing here. You start it up cold, and as soon as you start it up, it's going bup, 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 and then after it runs a little bit, it clears up and starts running good. No more problems for the rest of the day until you shut it off and let it set cold again. You got any ideas?
Spark plug?
It's close. Here's what I meant. Start the engine. While it's skipping, you shut it off. Don't let it keep running until it clears up. Shut it off. Shut it off while it's still skipping. Pull the spark plug in question, or all of them if you want to, and see if the skipper is wet with coolant or fuel. I've done this and pulled them out of there and there's steam rolling off that spark plug. Got coolant getting in the cylinder. Wet's the spark plug. It won't fire until it dries off. Now I have also done it whenever I would crank it up and it'd be skipping, shut it off, pull it out, and it'll be dark and sooty and wet with fuel. That injector's dripping. Got it? So you know you got an injector problem that way. Real quick and easy to do. It doesn't cost anything to do. It's a little bit of labor to get to it sometimes. If with coolant, a head gasket, or with intake gasket is suspect, with fuel, the injector is suspect. This guy right here had a leaking intake gasket. you know, because there's coolant that goes through there. If the intake gasket leaks, it can trickle coolant into a runner that's next to the intake, to the coolant runner on a V6, and it'll go down in there and it'll wet the plug like he was talking about. So he put an intake gasket on it and straighten it right out. Okay? You getting anything out of this? This is a troubleshooting thing. These are people fixing a real car. 2011 Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo 3.6, new alternator was installed, all fuses tested good, battery voltage 12.4 at battery. That sound like it's putting out? Not to me. Should have about 14.5 on there. 12.4 just means you're reading battery voltage. You know, web search indicated totally integrated power module. Remember I had that thing about fuse boxes the other day that I ran through? Here we go. Could cause this problem, install a new and alternator output remained at 12.4, inspected wire harness, no sign of any wiring concern. So he's, you know, knocking along here trying to figure this out. So here's what you got. Field control on that one. On Jeep for Chrysler, ever since the mid-80s, has had the voltage regulator built into the engine controller. That's something they like doing. All right, and so or not, maybe that's not the engine controller, but one of the controllers, one of the two. But anyway, you got this going here like that. So brown, pink, gray, red. This is B+. It's got to read that, so it'll know what to do with the field. And this right here actually goes out to the battery and takes the charge out to it. All right. So the PCM was not controlling the alternator field circuit. Replace reprogram PCM. What you could do on this, you can actually go into your special functions part of it, or your active test, and tell it that you wanted to energize the alternator field. And you go to that wire at that alternator where that field is supposed to be energizing, and see if that PCM can do that when you tell it to. You know, you're checking the field with your logic probe or whatever, and you're going to see if it can turn it off and on. And if you do that, and it won't turn it off and on, but it will turn it off on up here. Like in other words, if it ain't doing it, if you got it here, if you ain't got it here, but you do got it there, you could have a problem in between there. But if you ain't got it in either place, it's not what he had. Problems in here, not able to do it. Here's a 98 Honda CRV LX 2-liter extended crank. After a hot soak, it has an extended crank before it'll start. You know, dripping injectors will cause that, because that steam will get in there, and whenever it first goes in there and condenses on them plugs, it wets every darn plug in it. And it spins a little while before it dries them out. It can sit over a few hours, and overnight it will not start until you press the gas pedal. Once it starts, it runs rough for about 10-15 seconds, then runs fine, no smoke will start up, does not overheat. Got it? You got that issue right there going on. Here's the fix, believe it or not. This guy right here put some coolant system sealed tabs. Hey, Nick, that might be a good thing for you, right? Okay.
I was just, that's why I looked.
I saw that hand tilt on
I got to see this.
Fuel pressure would decay about 10 psi per hour with the engine off. That's not enough for pressure loss to cause that problem. If the fuel pressure doesn't hold really close to where it was for a pretty good little bit after you shut off the motor, in other words, if it goes back down to 0 within a minute or two, that's going to cause hard starting when it's hot. That's what he was looking at. That's what he looked at. They already cleaned the throttle body, left coolant fan was running slow, monitored coolant level, he was using about 8 ounces every couple of days. So he added 12 grams of GM stop leak. Problem gone. Replace the head gasket later this year. He might just keep driving it and see if it'd be aight. All right, 2000 Toyota Avalon XL, 3-liter. Came in for a mill light and air fuel sensor code, which is air fuel sensor is what they call kind of an oxygen sensor, but it's a different sensor sort of, you know, and that's a wideband thing. All right, replace sensor, both air fuel sensor, heater circuit is power check, voltage on ECU pins, has battery voltage. How many of you guys have worked your way to the electronic module where it's telling you about oxygen sensors and wideband sensors and all? It's really good stuff that you need to know that. You know, don't neglect that. We're running out of time. You know, your electude's a 4th of your grade. Remember that. So if you're piddling around and you aren't getting your electude done, you're gonna get burned at the end. So you don't want to go there. You don't want to do no all-nighter. You know, like Nick had to blow through all of his steering and suspension, you know, real quick. Nick, you ain't even started. All right. So, check the voltage on ECU pins, has battery voltage. Replace the sensor. You didn't really see anything there. Okay, here's the fix. The previous shop had replaced the head and put the ground on the valve cover. There's an easy place to put a ground. Put it on the valve cover. That's something I found out years ago. People, whenever we're working on little Bronco 2s, a little oxygen sensor ground was supposed to go to the back of the head on the right side, passenger side. Orange wire. Hard as heck to get to that. I mean, it's a pain to get to it. And so they just put it up on a manifold in another place. Because the ground was in the wrong place, the oxygen sensor wouldn't work right. Make it run rich, do all kind of crazy stuff. Okay? So put the ground where the ground is supposed to be. If you put it somewhere else, it's easier to get to, you may wind up with problems like this guy was talking about. All right, sensors can be unreliable if the PCM is grounded in the wrong place on the engine. Really important. 2002 Subaru Legacy 2.5 recently had head gaskets replaced along with the timing belt, spark plugs, catalytic converter, air fuel ratio sensor. Mill is owned with a catalyst code PO420. That's a scary code, it's a kiss of death if you don't have to buy a catalyst, right? Still storing the code after repairs, fuel trim's normal at idle, runs about -16 or -18 at 3,500. Now usually, if you have a vacuum leak, the fuel trim will be out of balance at idle, but it'll be normal whenever you're driving down the road. See what I mean? So if you see one that's out of line at idle, you know, you're going to be looking usually for some kind of an air leak. Or if you've got a mass airflow sensor that's a little skewed, like I was talking about the other day, you can call that. Still after storing the code. All right, so the car runs and drives very well. He installed the correct downstream sensor. Had the wrong sensor on it. Fuel trim number's right. This car got more power. He said there's still no sensor in there if you BI8. You know what I'm saying? You got to make sure that you're using the right one. All right, note the rear O2 sensor can affect fuel trim. Most people don't know that, or a lot of people don't know it. Some people do. There's probably more people out there than I think. But if the front sensor is not working, or if the rear one is not happy, then the engine controller will say, I don't care how this car runs, I want that catalytic converter not to melt down, and so I'm going to alter the fuel trim to make that rear sensor happy. And so it can screw your fuel trim up if that back sensor's not working right. You got that? You seen that before?
Yeah, my car of my sister here, the oxygen sensor was not working, and I think he had like 2 or 3 liters more per 100 kilometers.
Mm-hmm.
So needs more
Yep.
gas
Yep.
to drive the car.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, you know, and bad fuel economy.
Yeah.
2003 Chevrolet Impala LS 3.8, sometimes idles really high, like 3,000 RPM. Clean the throttle body passages and the idle air control. Replace throttle position with a Delco part. Drove the car for an hour, no problem, new page. Notice he said he replaced it with a Delco part. Now, I'll tell you something about the aftermarket parts. I'm not here to trash aftermarket parts, okay, because I've used a zillion aftermarket parts. We had one time that the crank sensor went bad on it. It would get hot and open up, and so I ordered a crank sensor for it. And the crank sensor that was on there when it was working, I was showing 1,050 ohms. The one I got out of the box, the new one that came from the parts store, and I ain't gonna say the name of it because I want to be friendly to these people on YouTube here. It had 1,350 ohms, which was a pretty good difference. Think about that. What's the percentage on that? Do the math. All right. So what you got to do is you got to look at the sensor and say, I don't know if I can trust this or not. But we put it in there because it wasn't hard to change, and the car may start and it may not. It may start and it may not. It would start and it wouldn't. It would start and it wouldn't. I said, I don't like that. I don't like that a bit. So I said, send me another one of them sensors. So he sent me another one of them sensors. And it was reading 1,250 ohms. It wasn't even the same as the first one they sent. And I said, that ain't no good. And so I ordered one on Amazon that had the same part number as the one that, you know, came out of the car. 1,050 ohms, dead on the money. She's still driving that car. You know, so, you know, be really careful about that, because occasionally you can have an aftermarket sensor that'll be bad. You can have an OEM sensor that'll be bad too. But the point is, I was working on a car one time that needed I put a mass airflow sensor on it because it was throwing a code for it. And this is a GM car, not working at Ford dealer. I had no books or nothing. So I put that on there. Stupid light wouldn't go off. And the car was running okay. And so I said, I'm going to drive this thing over to Chevrolet place and let Randy look at it. So I drove it over there and he said, well, it's got the right number of hertz and everything. I don't really see anything out of line there. And then he says, I think this thing just doesn't like this sensor. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, where'd you get this? And I told him, I said, you need to get a Delco sensor put on it. Really? Okay, so I went down there and got a Delco sensor put on it, the light went away. But it didn't like that sensor, just like he said. Occasionally you run into that problem. All right, the owner brought it back the next day with the same concern, couldn't duplicate it the second time. Okay? Replaced and reflashed PCM, took care of it. How it was reached wasn't discussed. He didn't say anything about how they figured it out. I think they may have done that to see what it was, see what was going on, and say that unless a smoking gun situation is present, it should be replaced before everything else has been eliminated. You can throw a really expensive PCM on there and that didn't fix it, you're going to be not happy. And they're not going to be happy. Just like tearing up your clock spring or something, you know. All right, 2004 Ranger XLT, intermittent no crank, replace neutral safety switch and ignition switch and starter relay. All right, neutral safety switch is here. Ignition switch would be up here out of the picture. All right, so there's your, here's your starter relay. So they would, we're concerned about this. With a test light connected to the tan red feed to the starter relay in crank, intermittent, no power in the relay. So sometimes you would have power there, and sometimes you wouldn't, whether it was in park or neutral or whatever. Where could the problem be? This is a thinking exercise for very small boys and one very large boy. He's looking around to see who the large boy is. Okay, where could the problem be? What do you think? Sometimes you're not getting power here. Is it likely to be a problem down here anywhere?
Maybe.
No.
Up top.
I would say no, because if you're not getting, see, you're looking for the power that's coming from up here. Could have a problem here, could have a problem in the wiring, could have a problem with the connector. There are several connectors. Look at all the connectors. You've got to go through a whole bunch of connectors. You could have a problem there in the smart junction box. You're just going to have to track it. See what I'm saying? What I like to do is I like to get something right up here, and I like to hook up something right down here, and maybe at a place or two in between, and then I turn it on and see which one of them lights comes on. See what I mean? Because that'll give you that'll pinpoint the problem right there. All right. And that's another little look at that. See all them connectors right there? 2280, you could have a problem in any of those connectors. And that means something, hot and cold makes them expand and contract and all that kind of thing. All right, 05, GMC Envoy 5.3, crank no start. Crank no start. You got to use the right terminology. Cranks normally won't start. I mean, like that. No crank means don't hear nothing, right? You get to start and die, start and stall, this kind of stuff. Make sure that you understand the terminology. I had this, and sometimes the service writers make boneheaded mistakes writing the doggone tickets. Like this guy says, he gave me this van, and he had this, each repair line is a separate repair, right? And there's one repair line up here. The very first repair line says, you have to turn on the left turn signal to start the van. Wow, I've never seen that before. What in the world is that? And I went there and tried to start it, and sure enough, I had to turn on the left turn signal, fire it up. So I pulled it in there, and I says, golly, so I went in there and I spent about 30 minutes tracking that down. I said, wait a minute, somebody has changed the wiring on this thing, so it'll be this way. I don't remember how they did it, but I remember it was deliberately done. And I went and told Curtis, the service writer, and he was a real winner, boy, I tell you. I went over and I says, Curtis, this is wired up this way. He goes, oh, I know that. I just put that on there so you know how to start it. What? Why couldn't you put a sticky note on there, man, instead of putting it on the repair line, This is the same guy that lost his house playing a game of pool one time. I'm not kidding.
What?
Yeah, playing a game of pool. He bet his whole house on a game of pool, lost his house.
Wow.
It's a wonder his marriage survived. Okay. The customer, that same guy came out there one time when I was in the parts room. He came walking in there and he goes, hey, there's a customer out here in the right-up area that needs 3 fuses. Can I take 3 fuses out of this car that you got out here and put it in there? And I said, well, I reckon so, Curtis. And I said, which 3 fuses he pulled out of there? And he carried them out there with a big smile on his face. And I turned around to the parts guy and I said, give me those 3 fuses back and charge them to him.
Straight up.
So I put the fuses back in the car and he paid for the fuses. He come around there with his old chin jutted up. I paid for my 3 fuses. I said, I know you did. Come over and ask me for that again. All you had to do was walk in here and say, give me 3 fuses and charge them to me, The customer stated that that kept after the remote start was used. How am I going to charge out 3 fuses on a warranty ticket? Come on. I did replace the ignition switch just due to the high failure rate. That didn't help. So I removed the Viper alarm remote start. It still wouldn't start. So at this point, I suspect I'm losing power from my main ECM relay, but I have yet to get the car acted up again. So he's losing the control signal ground from the ECM to energize the relay and was able to apply ground to the relay and make the engine run, so he knew for sure. So the wire from the box to the ECM was good. Didn't have continuity from the D1 pin under the junction box to the relay, but when I plugged everything back in, it would run perfectly, and now had continuity in the fuse box. Now, what I have seen on these Chevrolets, that relay right there is not replaceable. It's part of the box. I got a fuse panel laying right over there. It's got a bad start relay in there. In other words, you get to that pin down there, find out where that pin is, and you get on that pin, and you make sure it's got everything it needs to coming in, and the relay is a good one. Of course, you can't change it, so if it is a good one, whatever. Anyway, I get down here and I sit and say, I'm not getting any power coming out. Everything it's supposed to have going in, so you got this here bad. So I get a salvage yard box, plug it on there. And if I went from the dealer, you're going to be paying through the nose, but sometimes you have to do that. Replace the fuse box. The truck has not shut off since. He was overthinking it. That's the fuse box up there. All right, 2006 Nissan Titan XE 5.6 liter blower motor problem. Blower motor will stop working at some speeds. I don't even remember what I had under that, the words went under that truck, I had to kind of move it. Replace the variable blower control, no cigar. Constant power at blower motor and controller run white blue wire. When it happens to the blue white wire, got battery voltage as well, and it starts to ramp back down to about a volt as soon as it starts re-amping the blower motor starts working. Lower speeds, the blower seems to stay on without any issues. Hard time finding a circuit description, either all that or none fix. Alright, so there's your 2006 Nissan Titan XE 5.6. There's your variable blower control. There's your front blower motor. There's your front blower motor relay. So that blower control is basically your getting this signal from here. You know, so you might all notice that there's power going in there to power that up, and then the power going to here when that blower relay clicks on. Okay, so anyway, that's how that works right there. There's your in-vehicle sensor. You know, this controller right here looks for AC request. There's your control head. This right here is your air control. The green-red wire at pin 2 will go up to 4.8 volts on high speed. When the lower motor shuts off, drops to 3.76. The ground black-white has no voltage drop. Even when the blower stops, you try to use control head, no change. This is turning into a problem, and he was busting his fanny on this one. Tried 2 brand new aftermarket variable blower controllers that were faulty. Got one from the dealer, and that fixed it. You know what I mean? Although, remember the story I told you about the little light sensor in the dash on that Chevrolet pickup? The guy had 4 bad ones. Remember I told you that last week? And those were coming out of Chevrolet pipeline. And what does the letter NEW stand for? New? What does it stand for? Never, ever worked. So if it hadn't worked, you don't know if it does work till you try and see if it'll work, right? All right, 2007 Jeep Wrangler, 3.8 liter rough idle installed. He bought it with an engine knock. Did a complete engine rebuild. Had a slight stumble when accelerating. After 5 minutes, the red lightning bolt starts flashing and the traction control light comes on. Once this occurs, the stumble gets worse, and if I don't hold the throttle pedal down a bit, it will stall. So after it stalls, we cycle the key off and back on to restart it. Takes another 5 minutes for the problem to reoccur. I only have to hold the throttle. After that, it'll stay running, but still runs rough once the lights come on. I reset the TPS connection, check the TPS, the scanner shows it's commanding the computer to move. The truck was not doing this prior to the engine rebuild. He's disgruntled. One time I traded my cousin Billy Joe out of a 47 Willis Jeep that he had. It was sitting under the barn out there. Traded him an engine for it. Took that thing, went down to, this was in the early 80s, I went down to Dothan Auto Parts and bought all the parts I needed to rebuild that 47 Willis Jeep. They had them on the shelf. And I put, you know, the funny little thing, you know, pistons about that big around, the rod's about that long, and oddball. I built it all up and put it together. An old rope seal on the crankshaft made it hard to turn. So I put the trailer, you know, the tow bar over my dad's trailer hitch on his 66 Chevrolet pickup truck, and I put that thing in a gear that I could tell was forward gear, turned on the key and headed out across the pasture. And when that thing fired up, it was in 4-wheel drive, and it pushed me all over the place where I could get it stopped. But after that, it would start with a key. Man, I had a barrel of fun with that thing. It wouldn't go about 45 miles an hour, and it drank gas like a thirsty camel, but it was fun to drive. Right. And so now, after I've reset the TPS connection, checked the TPS on the scanner, and it shows it's commanding the computer to move. Wasn't doing that prior. So we checked out the EGR, noticed the tube to the EGR was loose. The gasket was so discreted, I think it was preventing the tube from being tightened properly. Put a thick new EGR gasket and torqued it down. Good to go. No more lights are stalling. Whee! You know, you would never think that something like that would cause the problem we was talking about, would you? And that's where that basically was right there. That's the end of the slideshow. Tell me something that you learned. You learned how to look at the clock as soon as the slideshow was done, didn't you? What do you think? Talk to me. Somebody picked up something. Don't embarrass me now.
I picked up a lot of things.
You picked up a lot of things?
And even
you got so much picked up, you just, but this is kind of giving you a perspective though. This is kind of giving you a perspective on how professional mechanics have to track stuff down. These aren't dealership mechanics. These are guys working at independent shops that works on a Honda today, a Toyota tomorrow, a Chevrolet now, and a Ford next week. I mean, they're working, they're going through one after another. But say that again? What?
I know how to read a scope.
Yep. Yeah, learning how to use a scope is really important. I mean, if you can read a scope and you know what you're looking at. Now, sometimes you'll have to get a known good pattern, you know. And I think if you pay something like, I can't remember, it's $20 a month or $10 a month or something on ATN, you know, that you've got access to their entire scope pattern library, and that's really handy to have. Especially if you're out there saying, well, I see a scope pattern here, but I'm not sure what it means. If you're familiar with looking at the scope pattern on that particular kind of vehicle, you'll know. If not, you won't, you see. But anyway,